Okay, time and temperature, aka the meat of food safety. Ha ha ha. First things first, you need a reliable thermometer. And I mean a thermometer that was intended to be used with food. Like people have weird thermometers all over their house. Unless it was intended to be used with food, it's not going to cut it. You need a specific food centric thermometer. And you've got a bunch of choices in all sorts of different price ranges. So if you can see it, number one, you have an analog probe thermometer. You can get them for as cheap as $5. And these work really well. They're easy to calibrate. The thing is, they can take a little longer to measure the food or measure the temperature of food. So if you stick it in like a chicken and you try to figure out like how hot the chicken breast is, like it could take like up to 60, sometimes 90 seconds to fully come to temperature. And in that time, your food may have cooled off somewhat. So it can be a little annoying to work with a thermometer that slow. But for cheapest option, that's the one. Second, you have a digital probe thermometer. It's a lot faster than an analog thermometer. Like you stick it in and they usually read within like 5 to 15 seconds, and they're usually super accurate, and they're not that expensive. You can get them for as cheap as $20 at either Amazon or at Target. Now, a really cool option, especially if you're cooking a lot of meat, is the digital probe with alarm. And they can run you anywhere from $30 all the way up to $80 or $100, but they're super cool. And so the way it works is you've got a little probe that sticks in your food with a wire that goes from the probe and it comes out of your oven, and then it hooks to this little alarm box. And on the box, you set the alarm that you want it to go off at. And you can just basically leave your food alone. And when your food finally comes to temperature, that little alarm will beep and let you know when you need to pull it out of the oven. It is amazing. Let me tell you, this is a game changer if you're easily distracted when you cook. Like me, I'm super distracted. And so before I got one of these, I would often start doing something else, and then whatever I was cooking would overcook, and it broke my heart. And these things are a lifesaver. And then there's my personal favorite, which is number 4. It's a digital instant read probe called a ThermaPen. And a ThermaPen is made by ThermaWorks. It's a little bit more expensive. It's $90 to $100, but these things are amazing and they're almost bulletproof. They will read a temperature in like 3 or 4 seconds. And all you have to do is get the little tiny tip, which is like half an inch long, into the middle of your food. And it reads really quickly, really accurately. And I've had mine for years and I love it. I cannot recommend a ThermaPen enough. Something really important that you need to keep in mind that a lot of people forget is you need to clean your thermometer immediately after measuring the temperature of food. I've seen so many people like stick their thermometer in food and like in a chicken breast, and they find out it's not cooked enough, and then they just lay it down on the counter, and then a few minutes later, like they've completely forgotten about it, and they pick it up and they use it to measure the temperature of something else. This is a problem. Like they just stuck it in a chicken breast and found out it is not to temperature. It is not sanitized. And then they put it in something else, which potentially contaminated the new food. So the best way to avoid this is to just clean your thermometer immediately after using it. It takes literally 1 second. You run it under hot water. You take like a soapy sponge and you like wipe it off, and then you run it under hot water again. It is super fast, and there's really no excuse for not doing it. Like, not cleaning your thermometer is a very dangerous rookie mistake, and I see people do it all the time. A few more things you need to keep in mind regarding thermometers. First, make sure your thermometer is accurate, and the manufacturer of your thermometer should provide instructions on how to test and calibrate your thermometer. But it's really important to make sure that it's measuring properly, otherwise it could put you at risk. Also, do not use glass thermometers with your food. They stand a really good chance of breaking, and then you've got a physical contamination problem, and you're never going to get all the glass out of your food, so you just have to throw it away. A lot of people say that, oh, I have a glass candy thermometer. You know what? Metal probe thermometers work great for candy too. If you want to be safe, keep the glass away from your food. One thing you need to keep in mind when measuring the temperature of foods with a thermometer is that you need to insert the thermometer into the thickest part of the food. So think of it this way. If you have a chicken breast that's like thick on one side and thin on the other, the thickest part of the chicken breast is where the heat is going to take the longest time to penetrate, right? So if you measure the temperature of your food in a thin area, like you're going to be getting an inaccurate reading because the middle of the thickest part of the food is going to be nowhere near that temperature. So you always want to measure temperature in the centermost spot of whatever it is you're cooking. You also want to allow 10 to 15 seconds for an accurate reading. Even with instant read thermometers, you can't like stuff them in and instantly pull them out. You need to wait until the little meter that tells you how hot it is stops moving and sits there for a few seconds. So let's take a second and revisit the temperature danger zone. So if you remember, The longer food stays in the danger zone, the more bacteria will grow and the faster it will grow. So, how much time food spends in this danger zone is really important. So, the primary danger zone is 41 degrees Fahrenheit to 135 degrees Fahrenheit, or 5 degrees Celsius to 57 degrees Celsius. Now, peak danger zone is the region of temperature in which bacteria grows the fastest. It proliferates like mad, and that is 70 degrees Fahrenheit to 125 degrees Fahrenheit, or 21 degrees Celsius to 52 degrees Celsius. Now, it's important to know that bacteria will still grow at refrigerator temperatures. It just grows much more slowly at temperatures below 41 degrees. This is why you can't put food in the refrigerator and it stays good forever. Food in the fridge still goes bad because food in the fridge will still grow bacteria and viruses. It just grows much more slowly. Now, once you freeze something, that basically halts bacteria growth, right? Like nothing grows below freezing temperatures. It's like frozen, right? And so as long as you keep something below freezing temperatures, it'll be safe for as long as you keep it in the freezer. Food is potentially compromised when it's 1, not been cooked to a safe temperature, 2, kept at the wrong temperature, or 3, cooled or reheated incorrectly. You need to remember these 3 areas because these 3 places are the ways that you're most likely to trip up in your food sanitation. Any food that sits within the danger zone for more than 2 hours needs to be immediately cooked to at least 160 degrees Fahrenheit or 71 degrees Celsius to kill all pathogens. Here's an unfun fact for you. In the danger zone, bacteria numbers can double as quickly as every 20 minutes. Then that new number doubles, and the new number doubles, and the new number doubles, and so on. So say you have 100,000 bacteria in a bowl of potato salad. If that potato salad is kept at peak danger zone, in 20 minutes, you could have 200,000 bacteria. In an additional 20 minutes, you could have 400,000 bacteria. In another 20 minutes, you could have 800,000 bacteria. 20 minutes after that, that's 1,600,000 bacteria. So I'm going to stop doing the math before I barf because it's not great. It's not making me feel great. But this goes to show you how important it is to keep food out of the danger zone and how quickly bacteria and other microbes proliferate when kept at the wrong temperature. So if you're trying to keep hot food hot, that's called holding food, and it's very important that you hold food at the proper temperature. Hot TCS foods need to be held at a temperature of at least 135 degrees, or ideally 145 degrees Fahrenheit, to keep bacteria from growing. And now if you remember, that is the very top of the danger zone, right? If something's held at below 135 degrees, bacteria is going to grow quickly. Now, this is why it's a problem when a restaurant serves you room temperature food. You don't know how long that food has been sitting at room temperature, right? Like if it's been sitting at room temp for a while and they only heated it up a little bit, like they haphazardly like microwaved it till it was like 130 degrees. It's been sitting at room temp for 2 hours. Like it's highly, highly dangerous. So if you ever get served room temperature food at a restaurant when it's supposed to be hot, send it back. When it comes to your fridge and freezer, they need to be kept at very specific temperatures. Your refrigerator should always be set to at least 38 degrees Fahrenheit or 3 degrees Celsius. Now, you could set it a little bit colder, but you start to run into weird problems because the food will begin to freeze if it's set to like 34, 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And some parts of your fridge are colder than others. So I know I've had a problem where like the back of my fridge was much colder than the front of my fridge. And so like I turned up the temperature or I turned down the temperature so that it hit like 37 degrees and the eggs at the back of my freezer or the eggs at the back of my refrigerator froze. It was a bummer. They all basically cracked and had to be thrown away. Your freezer should be set to 0 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 17 degrees centigrade or colder. Your freezer, you can actually make it as cold as you want. Like I have a chest freezer in the garage. I think it's at like negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit and it's great. Now, it's really important to have a fridge and freezer thermometer. These little guys are super cheap. They're like $5. I just looked on Amazon. You can get 2 for $6.50. You can get one for your freezer and one for your fridge. You can even get digital thermometers that like they keep track of the temperature in your fridge and freezer, and they will beep if they go below or above a temperature that you set them at. They're super, super handy. Now, grocery shopping is a big potential pitfall. You do not want to leave food sitting in the car after buying it. Like some people, they're like, okay, I'm going to go to 3 different stores. I'm going to go from like, Kroger to Target to Walmart or whatever. And if that food is left sitting in your car for like, an hour, hour and a half, like that is not good, especially if you've got high risk foods in there like chicken and eggs. You want to get your food home as soon as possible so that you can get it in the fridge. Now, if you find that you have to travel a distance to the grocery store or you think you're going to be out for hours, consider keeping a cooler in your car so that you can keep your cold food cold. It'll go a long way towards keeping you and your family safe. Then as soon as you get home, you need to refrigerate your food promptly, like literally as soon as you walk in the door. Don't put it down. You take off your shoes, you wash your face, wash your hands, like check your email, put your food away immediately. Like this is doubly true for eggs and meats and other perishables. Like if you bought a thing of potato salad, dairy products, they need to go in the fridge as soon as possible. So before cooking foods, a lot of people like to pull them out of their fridge and leave them on the counter or in the sink so they come up to room temperature. And this is definitely an issue if you need to defrost foods from the freezer. But here's the deal, okay? Do not let foods sit out for hours before cooking. It is a common human problem to forget things. And so you take a steak out of the fridge, you leave it sitting on the counter because you're going to make it for lunch. Your sister calls, the mailman knocks on the door, like you suddenly smell smoke outside, and then suddenly it's 5 hours later and that steak has been sitting there the whole time. Like it's just a bad idea. You want to keep like cold food cold. And the truth is that refrigerated food only needs 20 to 30 minutes to come to room temperature, right? So if you're baking a cake and you need to pull your butter and your eggs out of the fridge so they come to room temperature, like they only need 20 to 30 minutes. And you can in fact speed that up really quickly by putting your eggs in a little bowl of like gently warm water. And if you want to warm up your butter, like you can actually put your butter in a Ziploc bag and do the same thing. Just put it in a little like bowl of like lukewarm water, and you'd be surprised how quickly that comes up to room temperature without opening you up to the opportunity of forgetting about it and leaving it out there for hours. And one thing that you need to know is you always need to marinate foods in the refrigerator. Like people love to marinate things at room temperature because they think it makes it easier to cook. They think it will take it less time to cook. It's not worth the risk. Always marinate foods in the refrigerator. Defrosting food is kind of a sticky wicket, right? Because you're taking frozen food and you're trying to bring it to a cookable temperature. And it can take a long time and people are like, oh, I want to eat this faster. And so they try to jump through all these hoops to make it, come to room temperature faster, and they end up accidentally putting themselves at risk. So first of all, do not thaw foods at room temperature, especially meat and egg-based foods, right? Always, always, always thaw them in the fridge, right? You take them out the night before. It just takes a half a second of planning. You pull them out the night before and you put them in the fridge. You put them in a bowl so that if they leak while they're defrosting, they don't drip all over everything. And they're supposed to be on the bottom of your fridge. So if they do drip, they won't contaminate anything else, right? This is so important because foods left out at room temperature just drastically increase your chances of getting yourself or making somebody else sick. Now, sometimes like something might take a long time to thaw, right? Like if you're defrosting like a whole turkey or a big roast, in which case you just take it out of the freezer and you put it in the fridge like 2 days ahead of time. In the case of like a 10-pound turkey, it might have to be 3 days ahead of time, but never, ever, ever let food thaw or defrost at room temperature. Now, if you do need food to thaw more quickly, there's a couple things you can do. First, you can place it in a bowl of cold water and let just a slight trickle of tap water run into the bowl. You don't want to use hot water because that'll bring it into the danger zone and you'll hold it in the danger zone. Cold room temperature water is fine as long as it's still moving. Due to the thermodynamics of water, moving water, even cold water, will thaw and defrost frozen foods really fast. Now, this is really important. Thawed foods should never be left to sit at room temperature. Foods that have been thawed outside of the fridge must be cooked to a safe temperature right away after thawing. In other words, cook them immediately. Don't like pull out a steak, put it in, the bowl of cold water so that it defrosts really quickly, and then just let it sit at room temperature for like 3 hours. And even if you put it in the fridge, unless it's only been at room temperature for like literally a few minutes, like the time it takes for that food to like chill back down in the fridge, you're just putting yourself at risk and allowing bacteria to multiply. So just make a plan to cook food as soon as it's been defrosted. Now, if you decide to ignore my advice and thaw food at room temperature regardless, if it has been at room temperature for more than 2 hours, it's best to just throw it out. Or you can cook it to minimum 160 degrees Fahrenheit. But if you don't know how long you've left it out for, if it's just kind of like mystery food that's been sitting there for some unknown amount of time, just throw it out. And when I say for 2 hours, it means if you take a frozen steak out of the freezer and you throw it on the counter, it's not going to immediately come up to room temperature, right? It's got to defrost first. So if something has been at room temperature, meaning the food itself has been at room temperature or above 70 degrees for longer than 2 hours, you got to throw it out or cook it to 160 degrees. Like my dad always used to say this, when in doubt, throw it out. And I say this as a person who hates food waste. There's few things in this world I hate more than food waste. Well, the thing I hate as much as food waste is wasting money, and throwing away food is both. But really, what is your health worth, right? What's the health of the people you're cooking for worth? Like, what are the chances you're going to make somebody sick? Do you really want to risk it? As much as I hate wasting food, your health and the health of your loved ones is way more important than the couple bucks you're going to save from like salvaging a wasted steak. Now, what about leftovers? And that's a great question, and I'm so glad you asked. Leftovers do not stay good forever, even if they're in the fridge. Leftovers are highly risky foods, right? How long it's safe for depends on what's in it. It depends on how much protein's in it, how many carbs are in it, if it's got eggs in it, how much fat's in it. But the truth is that foods that are high in starch, protein, fat, or contain eggs go bad faster. And remember, all TCS foods go bad quickly, and you need to keep an eye on them, even at refrigerator temperatures. So saving leftovers for 3 to 5 days is a safe rule, but after that, it gets a little iffy. Like it might not make you full on sick, but you might want to hang around like the restroom that night. And it's not worth it. And if it smells bad or looks moldy, it's changing colors, like you see pink or black or green that were not there before, toss it. If you're not going to eat your leftovers quickly, consider freezing them. It's a great idea. Leftovers often freeze perfectly and then you have dinner later, which is great. However, freezing food does not reset the clock. Food that's been sitting in the fridge has already grown bacteria, and freezing will not kill those microbes, okay? So if you have food that's been sitting in the fridge for a week, it's already compromised. It's probably not good anymore. If you were to throw it in the freezer, like it's not going to kill what's in there, right? So you're going to pull those leftovers out of the freezer, eat them, and it's potentially going to make you sick. Or worst case scenario, you let your food sit in the fridge for like 4 or 5 days. It's grown bacteria. You throw it in the freezer, you pull it back out of the freezer, and you let it sit in the fridge for another 4 or 5 days. And those leftovers are now 10 days old. And this goes for meat, even fresh meat. Like freezing does not reset the clock. Freezing will not kill pathogens and microbes. So if something has already been compromised, like you've left it for too long and it's likely grown bacteria, freezing it is not going to save that food. Remember, bacteria still grows at refrigerator temperatures. It just grows more slowly, but not all that slowly. It still grows. If you want to extend the life of your leftovers, consider dividing large amount of leftovers into shallow containers for faster chilling and freezing. Foods chill way, way faster when they are thin and flat because there's simply like less thick areas of them to freeze. And a great example is a steak will freeze or refrigerate a lot faster than a big fat roast. You can also take like liquid leftovers like soups and stews, other things that are kind of soft and squishy, and put them in Ziploc bags and lay them flat on baking sheets. Then what you can do is you can actually slide the baking sheets into the freezer and they will freeze super fast because they're much thinner. And keep in mind that you should not stack foods until after they've been frozen or chilled, right? And I mean frozen solid or come completely to refrigerator temperatures, right? If you stack a bunch of things, like if you were to stack a bunch of Ziploc bags or stack a bunch of plastic containers, or say you were to put like a bunch of like sausages in Ziploc bags and then put them in like one big Ziploc bag, like the food in the middle of that stack will take way longer to chill or freeze, right? So generally what you want to do is you want to keep foods completely separate so that they chill or freeze that much faster. Now, for higher risk liquidy foods like soups or chicken stock, you want to chill them really fast. The longer they sit at like the danger zone temperature, they just multiply bacteria like mad. So you want to take them from the hot temperature where you pulled them off the stove and bring them down to below 60 degrees very, very quickly. And you do this by using an ice bath. An ice bath is super simple. Basically what you do is you take your liquidy or squishy food and you put it in a metal bowl. And then you take a second, larger metal bowl and you fill it with ice and ice water. Then you take your bowl with the food and you set it into the bowl with the ice and ice water. This surrounds the food with ice water and lowers the temperature much quicker. Now, if you want to lower the temperature even faster, you can stir the food in the metal bowl. And what'll happen is as you're stirring it, like more surface area of the food comes in contact with the icy sides of the metal bowl that it's in, and you'll be surprised at how quickly food will drop from like 140 degrees down to like 80 degrees, 70 degrees, and 60 degrees, sometimes in as fast as 20 minutes. It's incredible. And then as soon as your food hits 60 degrees, that's when you either refrigerate or freeze it. This works great for high-risk liquidy foods, anything with high starch, protein, fat, or eggs. Particular examples are soups, stocks, pastas, sauces, or anything made with eggs like custards, pudding, or egg sauces.